Good afternoon, Inspire Family Fellowship members and friends, and welcome to this week's Faster Pastor Minute. I remember many years ago at a previous church that I had served, hearing a testimony during worship. What was interesting about this testimony was it was a couple who were sharing, without getting into too much detail, but very openly sharing about the sin that they had been engaged in and how being welcomed back into the church and experiencing forgiveness was so significant to them in their lives. I personally thought it was really interesting and encouraging and meaningful to hear their story because, after all, who among us isn't sinners, right? But what was interesting is, following the service, I was later on talking to another couple about that, and they had an exact opposite reaction as I did. They basically said to me, "Yeah, that sounded nice, but you don't know what they did." And I was really taken aback by that because it's true, I didn't know what they did. However, I was also taken aback by the resistance to forgiveness by this other couple. And that brings us to an interesting question, and it's related to what we'll be exploring this week in church. At what point and what should be necessary for a person to be welcomed back into the church if they have lapsed in some way or another? What happens if a pastor lapses, and under what circumstances should they be welcomed back into the church? And maybe this would be the best thing to ask, and that's maybe our question for the week. What moments in your life have you experienced tension between forgiveness and sin in the church? Maybe it was a personal experience of your own, or maybe it's something that you observed. If you do give feedback in the comment section, just make sure that you don't name any names of people or churches, but you can just give a general, interesting observation about what you learned. We'll be covering the heresy of Donatism this week, and it's kind of related to that. You're going to learn some very interesting history and how that really applies today. So that's our Faster Pastor Minute. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you Sunday.